Mrs. Castellanos, if you have concerns about your family's motivations, you should consult with an attorney who specializes in elder law. As your physician, my responsibility is to your health and well-being, not to family members who might have other agendas. Does that mean you won't order unnecessary cognitive testing based on unsubstantiated claims from my children? That means I'll only recommend medical procedures that I believe are medically necessary based on my professional assessment of your condition. And based on that assessment, you don't need cognitive testing at this time. It was the first piece of good news I'd received in 2 days. That afternoon, I decided to visit our main work sites to check on current projects and maintain my normal business routine. I was determined to not let my family's scheme interfere with the day-to-day operations that kept our company profitable and our employees paid. At the University Hospital maintenance site, I found Maria Santos, our longest-serving supervisor and someone I'd always trusted to give me honest feedback about company operations. Señora Esperanza, Maria said, approaching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Can we talk privately? We walked to a quiet area away from the other workers, and Maria looked around to make sure we weren't being overheard before speaking. I don't know if I should be telling you this, but I'm worried about you, and I think you need to know what's been happening. What do you mean? Your son, Ricardo, has been coming to the job sites, talking to supervisors and crew leaders. He's been asking questions about your visits here, whether you seem confused or forgetful, whether you've made any decisions that didn't make sense. My stomach dropped. What kinds of questions? Whether you repeat instructions, whether you forget people's names, whether you seem to understand the work being done. He told several people that the family is concerned about your health and that they're trying to determine whether you should still be involved in daily operations. What did people tell him? Maria looked uncomfortable. Most people told him you seem fine, that you're sharp as ever. But, Senora, he wasn't just asking questions, he was taking notes, writing down people's responses like he was building some kind of case. Has anyone else from my family been asking similar questions? Your daughter Marisol came by the downtime office building last week. She talked to the cleaning crews about whether you seemed confused during your last visit. And that husband of hers, Stephen, he called asking about payroll procedures, whether you'd made any mistakes with employee payments. The scope of their investigation was broader and more systematic than I'd realized. They weren't just building a case based on family observations, they were actively soliciting evidence from employees, looking for any mistake or moment of confusion they could use to support a competency challenge. Maria, I need you to do something for me, I said. If any of my family members contact you or other employees with questions about my mental state or business decisions, I want you to document exactly what they ask and when they ask it. Can you do that? Of course, Senora. But can I ask what's going on? Are you sick? Are you planning to retire? I looked at this woman who had worked for me for 15 years, who had become like family to me, who trusted me to provide stable employment for her and dozens of other hardworking people. Maria, my family is trying to take control of the company by convincing a court that I'm too old and confused to run it properly. Everything they're doing, the questions, the documentation, the meetings with lawyers, it's all designed to build a case that I'm mentally incompetent. Maria's face hardened with an anger I'd rarely seen from her. But that's not true. You're one of the sharpest business owners I've ever worked for. You remember every employee's name, every detail about our contracts, every safety protocol. I know it's not true, but if they can convince a judge otherwise, they'll gain control of everything we've built, and I'm not sure they'll run the company with the same values we've always maintained. What can we do to help? The word "we" made my heart swell with gratitude. At least someone was on my side in this fight. Help me document the truth, I said. If they're going to build a case against me, I need to build a stronger case proving my competency. That evening, as I sat in my home office organizing the evidence I'd gathered about my family's conspiracy, my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Isabella standing on my porch, alone, which was usual. At 14, she rarely went anywhere without her parents or siblings. Mija, what are you doing here? Do your parents know where you are? They think I'm at soccer practice, she said, looking nervously over her shoulder. Abuela, can I talk to you? It's important. I invited her in and offered her something to drink, but she seemed too agitated to sit still. She paced around my living room, her artistic hands gesturing as she struggled to find words. Abuela, what I said last night at your party, I'm sorry. I didn't want to say it, but they made me. My heart stopped. Who made you?
Major Takeshi Yamamoto, scrambling his K-61 fighters from Chofu Airfield, radioed what would become one of the most prophetic observations of the Pacific War. The enemy bombers are too high, too fast, and too many. This isn't a raid, it's a demonstration of our helplessness. The Japanese response to that first B-29 raid revealed the complete inadequacy of their homeland defense system. Of the 125 Japanese fighters that managed to get airborne, fewer than 20 reached the B-29 formation's altitude. Of those, only 7 managed to engage the bombers directly. The results were catastrophic for the Japanese. They lost 17 fighters while shooting down just 1 B-29. More importantly, they learned that their anti-aircraft artillery, designed to engage aircraft at 20,000 feet maximum, couldn't even reach the American formations. Colonel Minoru Genda, the tactical genius who had planned the Pearl Harbor attack, submitted an emergency report to Imperial General Headquarters that would prove to be grimly accurate. The enemy possesses aircraft capabilities that render our current defensive preparations obsolete. We must assume that every major city, every military installation, and every industrial facility in Japan is now within range of American heavy bombers operating from bases we cannot effectively attack. But Japanese leadership refused to accept Genda's assessment. General Yoshijiro Umezu, chief of the Army General Staff, dismissed the B-29s as terror weapons with limited strategic value. Admiral Soemo Toyoda argued that the Americans couldn't sustain such long-range operations. Even Emperor Hirohito's advisors suggested that the November 24th raid was likely a one-time demonstration rather than the beginning of systematic bombing. They were catastrophically wrong. Within days of the first Tokyo raid, B-29s appeared over other unreachable targets across Japan. Nagoya on November 27th, Kobe on December 19th. The pattern became clear to Japanese military analysts, even if their superiors refused to acknowledge it. American bombers could now strike any target in Japan with impunity. What the Japanese didn't yet understand was that the November 24th raid represented just the beginning of American B-29 operations. In the Marianas Islands, construction crews were completing additional air bases capable of supporting over 1,000 B-29s. In American aircraft factories, production lines were delivering 100 new superfortresses every month. But most terrifying of all was what Japanese intelligence was beginning to piece together from intercepted American communications and prisoner interrogations. The B-29s, flying from the Marianas, were just one part of a massive strategic bombing campaign. Additional B-29 wings were being deployed to bases in China and India. The American plan wasn't just to bomb Japan, it was to systematically destroy every element of Japanese industrial and military capability from the air. As December 1944 drew to a close, Colonel Genda submitted a final assessment that would prove prophetic. The Americans have solved the fundamental problem of strategic warfare, how to deliver devastating firepower across vast distances with mechanical precision. What we witnessed in November was not the climax of their bombing campaign, but merely its opening movement. The stage was set for a transformation of warfare that would make the Doolittle raid look like a pinprick and turn Japan's confidence in geographic protection into a deadly miscalculation that would cost hundreds of thousands of lives. But what happened next would exceed even Colonel Genda's most pessimistic predictions, as American industrial might combined with revolutionary tactics to unleash destruction on a scale that would reshape not just Japan, but the entire nature of modern warfare. The silver specks on Sachiko Tanigawa's radar scope had shattered Japan's illusion of geographic immunity. But what began as precision bombing raids in November 1944 was about to transform into something far more devastating. The B-29 superfortresses that had shocked Japanese defenses with their technological superiority were merely the harbingers of a campaign that would redefine the very nature of warfare itself. What happened next would exceed even the most pessimistic Japanese predictions and demonstrate that American industrial might, when fully unleashed, could achieve destruction on a scale previously unimaginable. February 19, 1945. Kadena Air Operations Center, Okinawa. Major General Curtis LeMay stood before a map of Japan dotted with red pins marking previous B-29 targets, his weathered face reflecting the frustration of 4 months of precision bombing that had yielded disappointing results. The November raids that had shocked Japan had achieved strategic surprise but limited physical damage. Cloud cover, high-altitude winds, and the inherent limitations of precision bombing from 27,000 feet had reduced the effectiveness of American attacks far below expectations. "Gentlemen," LeMay announced to his assembled wing commanders, his voice carrying the weight of impending decision. "Precision bombing isn't working. We're flying 3,000-mile round trips to drop bombs that miss their targets more often than they hit them. It's time we stopped pretending we're playing by peacetime rules and started fighting a war." Lieutenant Colonel Diana Reeves, operations officer for the 73rd Bombardment Wing, had been working with LeMay's staff to develop radical new tactics that would maximize the B-29's destructive potential. Her analysis of previous missions revealed that high-altitude precision bombing, while psychologically devastating to Japanese morale, was physically destroying less than 15% of targeted industrial capacity.
The Japanese have dispersed their aircraft production into small workshops throughout residential areas, Reeves explained to the assembled commanders. Precision bombing from high altitude can't effectively target these facilities without massive collateral damage to surrounding areas. But there's another approach, one that turns Japanese urban planning against them. The new doctrine that emerged from these February planning sessions would transform the B-29 from a precision instrument into a weapon of area destruction. Instead of bombing from 27,000 feet with high-explosive bombs aimed at specific targets, LeMay proposed flying at 5,000 feet at night, carrying maximum loads of incendiary bombs designed to ignite the wooden structures that dominated Japanese cities. The tactical revolution was comprehensive. Flying at low altitude would eliminate the navigation problems caused by jet streams at high altitude. Night operations would reduce losses to Japanese fighters. Most importantly, incendiary bombs would create firestorms that would consume not just military targets, but the entire urban industrial complexes that supported Japanese war production. "We're not just changing tactics," LeMay explained to General Henry Hap Arnold in a classified communication. "We're recognizing that in modern industrial warfare, the distinction between military and civilian targets has become meaningless. Japanese aircraft are being assembled in homes, bomb components manufactured in schools, military equipment produced in neighborhood workshops. We can either destroy these facilities individually with precision bombs, or we can eliminate entire production districts with incendiaries." The night Tokyo burned. 300 hours and 7:30 minutes. March 9, 1945. Shirahama Prefecture, Japan. Air Raid Warden Emiko Watanabe was completing her evening patrol when the sirens began wailing across Tokyo's Sumida ward. Unlike previous alarms that had signaled high-altitude precision bombing, tonight's warning carried an urgent note that made experienced civil defense workers pause. Something was different. From her position atop the Yamada Elementary School, Watanabe could see the approaching B-29 formations with unprecedented clarity. Instead of the silver specks flying at impossible altitudes, these aircraft were clearly visible at what appeared to be dangerously low altitude. Their formation patterns were different too. Not the tight defensive boxes designed for high-altitude operations, but loose streams optimized for rapid target coverage. Captain Maria Santos, bombardier aboard Devil's Darling, was experiencing her first low-level night mission over Japan. Flying at 5,000 feet instead of the usual 27,000, she could see individual buildings, streets, and even people running through Tokyo's narrow alleys. The city spread out below us like a detailed model, she later wrote in her mission diary. Every structure was clearly visible in the moonlight, the wooden houses packed together like matchboxes, the narrow streets that would become funnels for flame, the industrial workshops scattered throughout residential neighborhoods. At 0:15 hours on March 10, 1945, the first M69 incendiary bombs began falling on Tokyo's Sumida and Honjo wards. Each bomb contained 38 hexagonal tubes filled with jellied gasoline that would burn for 15 minutes at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The mathematical precision was devastating. 1,665 tons of incendiaries designed specifically to ignite Japanese construction materials. Watanabe watched in horror as the first fires began spreading with unnatural speed through her neighborhood. The wooden houses that had provided affordable housing for Tokyo's working families became fuel for a conflagration that grew beyond anyone's ability to control. The flames moved like a living thing, she later testified. They jumped from house to house, street to street, consuming everything combustible in their path. Within minutes, entire city blocks were burning simultaneously. The incendiary bombing created conditions that exceeded even Americans' expectations. Tokyo's residential areas, built primarily of wood and paper to withstand earthquakes, became perfect fuel for sustained combustion. The narrow streets that had provided charm and community intimacy became wind tunnels that accelerated flame spread. The fire department's equipment, designed for individual structure fires, was completely overwhelmed by dozens of simultaneous conflagrations. Captain Elena Kowalski, piloting Pacific Vengeance in the second wave of bombers, witnessed the results of the initial attack as her formation approached the target area. The entire eastern section of Tokyo was already engulfed in flames, she recorded in her log. The fires were so intense they created their own weather systems, massive updrafts and wind patterns that made flying dangerous even at our altitude. The city was literally burning itself to death. Fire Chief Kenji Nakamura, commanding Tokyo Metropolitan Fire Department operations in the Sumida ward, found his carefully planned emergency responses completely inadequate for the scale of destruction. We had protocols for building fires, even for multiple building fires, he later told occupation authorities. But we had no procedures for dealing with an entire district burning simultaneously. Our equipment couldn't reach the fires through streets filled with fleeing civilians, and our water pressure dropped to nothing when hundreds of hydrants were opened at once. The human cost began mounting within hours. Tokyo's residential districts housed over 1.5 million people in densely packed neighborhoods where escape routes were limited. As the fire spread, these same neighborhoods became death traps for families unable to reach safety. Watanabe organized evacuation efforts for her sector, but the speed of flame spread overwhelmed civilian emergency planning.
The fires created their own wind systems, recalled survivor Fujiko Tanaka, who lost her home and 3 family members in the Hanjo ward. Tornado-like whirlwinds of flame would suddenly appear, jumping across fire breaks and igniting buildings that should have been safe. People were being burned alive while running through streets that had become corridors of fire. By dawn on March 10th, the mathematics of destruction had achieved unprecedented scale. 16 square miles of Tokyo, an area larger than Manhattan below 14th Street, had been completely destroyed. Over 100,000 civilians were dead, making it the single most destructive air raid in human history. The Sumida River, which residents had hoped would provide escape routes, was filled with the bodies of those who had died seeking refuge in its waters. The March 9-10 Tokyo firebombing established a template of destruction that American forces would repeat across Japan with systematic precision. But the human stories emerging from the ashes revealed consequences that went far beyond military strategy. The transformation of the B-29 from a precision weapon to an area destruction tool had created a new category of warfare that targeted not just industrial capacity, but entire civilian populations. Nurse Akiko Yamamoto, working at Tokyo General Hospital during the firebombing, witnessed medical horrors that redefined her understanding of warfare's human cost. The burn victims arriving at our hospital weren't just injured, they were people whose flesh had been seared off their bones by temperatures no human body could survive. We had no medical protocols for treating burns covering 90% of a person's body. Our morphine supplies, rationed for battlefield injuries, were exhausted within hours treating civilian casualties. The hospital's morgue, designed for perhaps 50 bodies, received over 800 corpses in the first 12 hours after the raid. Many victims were burned beyond recognition, creating identification crises that would traumatize families for years. Children, separated from parents during evacuations, wandered through refugee camps, many never reuniting with surviving family members. Dr. Hiroshi Sato, chief of pediatric services at the hospital, documented medical conditions that had no precedent in civilian medicine. We treated children suffering from smoke inhalation so severe it had destroyed their lung tissue permanently, he wrote in classified medical reports later seized by occupation forces. We saw burn injuries that had fused family members together as they died embracing each other. These weren't war injuries. They were evidence of warfare against civilian populations that violated every medical understanding of proportional response. The psychological trauma extended beyond physical injuries. Social worker Reiko Matsui, organizing relief efforts for firebombing survivors, encountered a new category of war trauma that military medicine wasn't equipped to address. Entire families would arrive at refugee centers in complete psychological collapse, she reported. Children who had watched their parents burn alive, mothers who had been forced to choose which children to save during evacuation, fathers who had failed to protect their families despite their best efforts. The psychological casualties exceeded the physical casualties by enormous margins. The economic consequences rippled through every aspect of Japanese society. The Sumida ward had housed not just residences, but thousands of small workshops producing aircraft components, military equipment, and industrial supplies. The destruction of these distributed manufacturing facilities achieved what months of precision bombing had failed to accomplish: the complete elimination of significant portions of Japan's war production capacity. Factory owner Kenji Watanabe lost not just his aircraft component workshop in the March 10th raid, but his entire workforce. My facility employed 200 people. After the firebombing, 73 were dead, 89 were too injured to work, and the remainder had fled Tokyo to stay with relatives in rural areas. Even if I could rebuild the factory, there would be no workers to operate it. The agricultural impact was equally devastating. Tokyo's urban farms, which had provided supplementary food for over 500,000 residents, were completely destroyed. The loss of these food sources, combined with transportation disruption caused by bombing, created immediate starvation conditions for firebombing survivors. Merchant Fumiko Sato, who had operated a small grocery serving the Hanjo ward, described the immediate aftermath. There was nothing left to sell and no customers left to buy anything. The neighborhood that had supported my business for 15 years had simply ceased to exist. The people were dead, displaced, or destitute. Commerce, community, civilization itself, all burned away in a single night.
The campaign expands. 12 to 1530. The success of the Tokyo firebombing, measured in destroyed industrial capacity and disrupted war production, led to immediate expansion of incendiary attacks against other Japanese cities. But what emerged was not just a military campaign. It was systematic urban destruction that would reshape Japanese civilization itself. March 11, 1945, Nagoya. Major Jennifer Walsh, leading the 58th Bombardment Wing's first incendiary mission against Japan's fourth-largest city, approached her target with tactical knowledge gained from the Tokyo raid. "We knew exactly what M69 incendiaries would do to Japanese urban construction," she later wrote. The Tokyo raid had provided a terrible blueprint for efficient city destruction.
British Nagoya attack demonstrated the scalability of incendiary tactics. 285 B-29s dropped 1,790 tons of incendiaries, destroying 3.15 square miles of urban area and eliminating major aircraft production facilities that had previously survived precision bombing attempts. The Mitsubishi aircraft plant, which had continued production despite repeated high-altitude attacks, was completely destroyed, along with the residential neighborhoods housing its workforce. Plant supervisor Takeshi Yamada watched his factory burn from a hillside evacuation point. "The Americans had bombed our facility 7 times with high-explosive bombs," he recalled. "We rebuilt after each attack, dispersed operations, created underground workshops. But the incendiaries didn't just destroy the factory, they eliminated the entire industrial district, the workers' housing, the transportation networks, everything necessary for aircraft production." March 13, 1945. Osaka. The destruction expanded to Japan's second-largest industrial center, where 274 B-29s delivered another demonstration of systematic urban elimination. 8 square miles of Osaka's industrial core were destroyed, including facilities producing naval equipment, aircraft engines, and military electronics. Local government official Rika Tanaka documented the collapse of civilian administration. The bombing didn't just destroy buildings, it eliminated the entire infrastructure of modern urban governance. Police stations, fire departments, hospitals, schools, municipal offices, everything necessary for maintaining civil order was consumed in the fires. We weren't just losing the war, we were losing civilization itself. The pattern repeated across Japan with mechanical precision. March 16th, Kobe attacked by 307 B-29s, 3 square miles destroyed. March 19th, Nagoya attacked again, another 3 square miles eliminated. April 13th, Tokyo attacked for the second time, targeting areas that had escaped the March raid. Captain Elena Kowalski, now a veteran of multiple incendiary missions, observed the systematic nature of the campaign. Each raid was planned with mathematical precision to maximize destruction while minimizing aircraft losses. We studied aerial photographs of previous attacks, identified surviving industrial areas, calculated optimal bomb loads for specific urban densities. This wasn't random terror bombing, it was scientific destruction of Japan's urban industrial civilization. The cumulative effect transcended individual raids. By May 1945, American B-29s had destroyed over 180 square miles of Japanese urban area, equivalent to eliminating every major city on the American East Coast from Boston to Washington. The scale was unprecedented in human warfare, representing the complete destruction of entire urban ecosystems. Sociologist Dr. Michiko Sato, studying urban destruction patterns for the Japanese government, submitted reports that captured the campaign's comprehensive impact. The American bombing is eliminating not just military targets, but the entire social and economic infrastructure that supports modern Japanese civilization. They are systematically destroying the accumulated urban development of centuries, reducing major cities to medieval conditions. The impossible mathematics of destruction. By summer 1945, the statistical reality of the B-29 campaign had achieved proportions that exceeded pre-war imagination. The aircraft that Sachiko Tanigawa had first tracked on her radar scope in November 1944 had become the instrument of Japan's systematic destruction, delivering more destructive power than any weapon system in human history. Lieutenant General Rika Matsudaira, now serving as chief analyst for damage assessment, compiled statistics that told the story of national annihilation.
The numbers are beyond comprehension, she wrote in her final strategic assessment. 334 major industrial facilities completely destroyed, 2.25 million buildings eliminated, 8.5 million civilians made homeless, 400,000 dead from bombing alone. These aren't military casualties. This is the destruction of Japanese society itself. The industrial impact was comprehensive. Aircraft production had fallen 85% from peak levels. Naval shipbuilding had ceased entirely at most facilities. Electronics manufacturing, critical for radar and communications equipment, had been reduced to less than 10% of wartime requirements. Even basic consumer goods production had stopped in most areas. Colonel Dorothy Richardson, now coordinating B-29 operations from multiple Pacific bases, oversaw logistics that dwarfed previous military aviation efforts. We were operating over 2,000 B-29s from bases across the Pacific. Daily sortie rates exceeded 1,000 aircraft. Monthly bomb tonnage delivered to Japanese targets exceeded 40,000 tons. The scale of destruction we were achieving was limited only by our industrial capacity to produce incendiary bombs. The efficiency statistics were staggering. Each B-29 sortie was now destroying, on average, 4.7 acres of urban area. The cost-effectiveness of incendiary bombing exceeded precision bombing by over 800%. A single night raid could eliminate more industrial capacity than months of daylight precision attacks. But the human statistics were even more overwhelming. Medical researcher Dr. Akiko Yamamoto, now coordinating civilian casualty assessment, documented suffering on unprecedented scales. Burn casualties from incendiary raids exceeded our entire medical system's capacity to provide meaningful treatment. Hospitals designed for local populations were receiving patients from entire prefectures. Medical supplies, already rationed for military use, were completely exhausted treating civilian bombing victims.
British, the psychological impact created cascading social collapse. Education Ministry official Kenji Nakamura reported that over 3,000 schools had been destroyed by bombing, with 400,000 students displaced from their educational institutions. "We're not just losing the current war," he observed. "We're destroying the human infrastructure necessary for Japan's future development." Transportation networks had suffered complete breakdown. Railway facilities, targeted both directly and damaged collaterally by urban fires, could no longer maintain connections between major cities. Food distribution, already strained by naval blockade, became impossible in bombed areas. Starvation conditions appeared in cities that had never experienced food shortages in modern history. Urban planner Fumiko Tanaka, studying reconstruction requirements for post-war planning, calculated costs that exceeded Japan's total pre-war gross domestic product. "The Americans have destroyed accumulated urban capital that required centuries to develop," she reported. "Complete reconstruction would require resources that Japan cannot generate for decades, assuming immediate peace and international assistance." The End of Illusions, 1900 hours to 2130 hours. August 6, 1945, Hiroshima. The atomic bomb dropped by the B-29 Enola Gay represented the culmination of technological superiority that had begun with conventional B-29 operations. But for Japanese observers who had witnessed months of systematic urban destruction, the atomic weapon was simply the ultimate expression of American capability to destroy Japanese cities completely and efficiently. Sachiko Tanagawa, now senior radar operator for Homeland Defense Coordination, tracked the lone B-29 approaching Hiroshima on her scope without particular alarm. After months of massive bombing formations, a single aircraft seemed almost insignificant. "We had become accustomed to formations of hundreds of bombers," she later wrote. "One aircraft didn't seem threatening compared to what we had been experiencing." The atomic bomb's immediate destruction of Hiroshima, eliminating 4.7 square miles in seconds rather than hours, represented technological advancement, but not strategic surprise. Japan's urban areas had already experienced systematic destruction that exceeded atomic bombing in total scope and casualties. Lieutenant General Matsudo, reviewing damage assessments from conventional bombing, observed that atomic weapons were significant primarily for their efficiency rather than their total destructive capability. A single aircraft achieved what previously required hundreds of bombers, she noted. But the total destruction was comparable to what we had already experienced in Tokyo, Osaka, and other major cities. August 9, 1945, Nagasaki. The second atomic bombing demonstrated American capability to repeat atomic attacks, but it also occurred against the backdrop of continued conventional B-29 operations that were systematically eliminating Japan's remaining urban areas. The Japanese surrender, announced on August 15, 1945, was driven by the combination of atomic demonstration and ongoing conventional destruction that made continued resistance impossible. Emperor Hirohito's surrender speech acknowledged military defeat, but the underlying reality was social and economic collapse caused by systematic B-29 operations. Prime Minister Kentaro Suzuki's final cabinet meeting before surrender focused not on military casualties, but on civilian suffering that had made governments impossible. We cannot continue to subject our people to destruction that serves no military purpose, he stated. The American bombing has eliminated our ability to function as a modern state.
British. The silver specks that Sachiko Tanigawa had first detected on her radar scope in November 1944 had proven to be harbingers of warfare's transformation. The B-29 superfortress had demonstrated that technological superiority, combined with industrial capacity and strategic determination, could achieve destruction on scales previously unimaginable. Japan's confidence in geographic protection had been shattered not just by atomic weapons, but by systematic conventional bombing that eliminated urban civilization itself. The 670,000 tons of bombs delivered by B-29s had proven that no fortress, regardless of natural barriers, could withstand determined application of advanced technology and industrial resources. The campaign's efficiency was unparalleled, 147,000 combat sorties delivering destruction that exceeded every previous military operation in human history. The cost-effectiveness was equally remarkable. Strategic objectives achieved through air power alone, without the massive casualties that would have resulted from invasion. But the most significant legacy was conceptual. The B-29 had proven that future wars would be decided not by geography or traditional military strength, but by technological capability and industrial capacity. The aircraft that had seemed impossible to Japanese calculations in 1943 had become the instrument of their complete defeat by 1945. Lieutenant General Matsudo's final assessment, submitted to occupation authorities, captured the campaign's historical significance. The American B-29 represented more than technological advancement. It demonstrated the obsolescence of traditional defensive thinking. Geographic barriers, which had protected Japan for centuries, became irrelevant when confronted with sufficient engineering capability and industrial determination. The lesson for future generations is clear. In technological warfare, distance provides no security, traditional fortifications offer no protection, and only continuous innovation ensures survival. The transformation was complete. Japan's belief in geographic immunity had been destroyed as thoroughly as their cities, replaced by the understanding that in the age of technological warfare, no target was beyond the reach of a sufficiently determined and capable adversary. The silver aircraft that had appeared impossible on radar scopes in November 1944 had fulfilled their promise of systematic destruction, proving that American industrial might, when fully committed to victory, could achieve objectives that seemed mathematically impossible to those who underestimated the power of technological revolution combined with strategic determination.